Well, shalom, shalom. I just want to welcome everyone to the Sabbath Day conference call. This is Barbara, and I'm serving as your host today, and Brother Pete is your co-host.
I'm so glad you could join us for this study today.
So how did we get a 29.5-day month? The whole world has a 29.5-day month. How did this happen? Well, history is a good witness. We still have some good historical records, and we will also see what is in scriptures. But the calendars in antiquity were usually lunar solar, depending on the introduction of intercalary months to align the solar and lunar years. And I'll leave all these links below. That's from History of Calendars. So around 700 BC, all the calendars of the world were changed. And it's known by many historians as well, and is well documented in many historical texts, that in the 8th century BC, there was a major change in all the calendars, not just in Israel. Worldwide, there was a change in the days of the month. And this change affected many different and unrelated cultures worldwide, including, but not limited to, Chinese, Aztec, Greece, Babylonians, Egyptians, early Romans, and many others. And before this change, all of these different widely scattered cultures are recorded as using a 360-day, 12 months per year, 30 days per month calendar. Then suddenly, in the 8th century, these cultures who all had too many days in their year, they suddenly had 5 days extra each year. All of these cultures made up myths and stories about how the gods battled and the moon lost and the sun won the battle, so the sun gained an extra 5 days and so on. They all discarded their old 360-day calendars as they followed the solar year. So the sun gained 5 extra days.
In the 8th century BC, civilizations all over the world either discarded or modified their old 360-day calendars. The 360-day calendars had been in use for the greater part of a millennium. In many places, month lengths immediately after that change were not fixed, but were based instead upon observations of the sky. During the period when month lengths were not fixed, new moons were usually sighted after either 29 or 30 days. If clouds obscured vision on the 30th day, a new month was declared to have begun. When month lengths were identical with lunations, only those that lasted 30 days were considered to be normal. This was probably because all months had previously been 30 days for such a long period of time. During this period in Greece, for example, months that consisted of 30 days were considered to be full. Those that lasted only 29 days were said to be hollow. Months containing 30 days were also called full in Babylon, but those containing 29 were deemed to be deficient, and again, defective. And again, the links below.
So from Egypt, the Canopus degree states that the calendar had 360 days a year, and then the Mayans added 5 days to their 360-day year. I'll let you pause the screen and you can read this all and look the links up below. The Peruvians also had a 360-day year calendar in ancient times. And finally, China had a calendar of 360 days in ancient times. The indication is overwhelming in that ancient calendars consisted of a year of 360 days evenly. All of them had months of exactly 30 days, which aligned with the moon at that time. It would appear that the difference between ancient calendars had nothing to do with the number of days in the month or year, but mainly with the names associated to the months and years. All of the ancient societies started their year in the spring with new moon closest to the spring equinox. From biblical sources, Exodus 12 states that Nisan is the first month, Abib, which falls in the spring of the year. This was still true in the time of Esther. See the book of Esther, who namely indicates that Adar was the 12th month or the last month of the year. And this book, I ordered this book too. This is an interesting book by Dale Wong, and he shows historical evidence in his book, again, of all the ancient cultures that had, and he gives you the records of all that had 360-day year, and all of them changed in the 8th century at the time of Hezekiah. Here are the several of the civilizations listed and documented in his book. Ancient India, ancient Persia, ancient Babylon, ancient Assyria, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, the Mayans, Mexicans, Peruvians, ancient China. Again, it's all recorded in history.
After the calamitous events around 750 to 700 BC, calendars around the world were adapted and not in the same manner. Egypt added 5, I'm not going to try that word, special days to a new empirical type calendar. The Hebrews had to modify their calendar to represent the Metonic lunar solar calendar that would track dates by both lunar and solar cycles. Their festival year required a precise accounting of the lunar-related months. The Romans abandoned the lunar cycle and went with the solar cycle due to the agricultural growing seasons.
Okay. Well, King Hezekiah reigned over Judah from 715 to 687 BC. And this is about Hezekiah's sign. Did that have anything to do with our 29.5-day months?
Isaiah's and the sign. Isaiah was sent to Hezekiah in his sickness to say, "Thus saith Yahweh, the Elohim of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer and have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee on the 3rd day, and thou shalt go up to the house of Yahweh." And Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, "What shall be the sign that Yahweh will hear me, and that I will go up into the house of Yahweh the 3rd day?" And Isaiah said, "This shall be the sign unto thee from Yahweh, that Yahweh will do the thing that he hath spoke. Shall the shadow go forth 10 steps, or go back 10 steps? And Hezekiah answered, It is a light thing for the shadow to decline 10 steps. Nay, but let the shadow return backward 10 steps. And Isaiah the prophet cried to Yahweh, and he brought the shadow 10 steps backwards, by which it had gone down on the dial of Ahaz. And that from 2 Kings 20:5-11. And Isaiah 38:8, it is said, "Behold, I will cause the shadow on the steps which is gone down on the dial of Ahaz with the sun to return backward 10 steps. So the sun returned 10 steps on the dial thereon it was gone down." So if the sun and the moon are Yahweh's calendar, and they are, what would happen if the sun moved from its original place, such as in 2 Kings 29-10? Shadow returned backwards 10 degrees. First, we must understand that for the sundial's shadow to return backwards 10 degrees, the sun would have to return backwards from its current location at that time of the day to where it was 10 degrees, earlier.
So this, for an example, is the stairway of Ahaz, we'll say. and the state of the sun, for example, at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So you see we have 12 steps here. For the simplicity, we say that the sun moves from right to left, and at 12 o'clock, the stairway of Ahaz is fully exposed. At that moment, there is no shadow. Now, let's say we go back to the morning, 10 degrees. In the morning, Yah brings the sun back 10 degrees, and the stairs 1 up to 10 become under the shadow. This is just a simple illustration to kind of get it in my mind. I like pictures, and that's how I make sense of things. So the shadow went back 10 degrees. So 10 degrees, note that Yah dictated exactly how many degrees of the change, which was 10 forward or backwards. He did not leave that up to Hezekiah. Now, come back to how much time this was 10 degrees. As we know, people still use sundials even today, although mostly just for recreational and scientific purposes. It is a known fact that for most of the earth, 15 degrees on a sundial is equal to 1 hour. So if Hezekiah's sundial returned backwards 10 degrees, that would mean the shadow moved backwards 2/3 of an hour, as 10 is 2/3 of 15. If 15 degrees is equal to 1 hour, 60 minutes, that would mean 10 degrees is also 2/3 of an hour, which is 40 minutes. So over here on the right is the math, the question, how much time is 10 degrees? Well, the answer is 40 minutes. So we have 5 degrees plus 5 degrees plus 5 is 15. And that equals 15 degrees, and there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. So 10 degrees is 2/3 of 15 degrees. So that would be 5 plus 5 equal 10. So 10 degrees equals 40 minutes, or 2/3 of an hour.
The moon never changed its course. Okay, since we know that 10 degrees equals 40 minutes, that means Hezekiah's sundial shadow returned backwards 40 minutes. I know what you're thinking. Okay, so they had an extra 40 minutes that day, so what? Well, we must remember that Yahweh's calendar is both the sun and the moon. It makes no mention of the moon here. Here it only speaks of the sun's position changing 10 degrees, which we now know was 40 minutes. The moon never changed its course. It just continued its daily orbit as it always had.
Well, it can easily be seen here that this would have altered the relationship of time between the sun and moon's orbits by 40 minutes. However, although it has only changed once, each and every day since that time, the 40-minute alteration is still evident. In other words, the next day after this happened, the sun and moon's orbits relationships were still altered by 40 minutes. The day after that, there is still an alteration of 40 minutes. Months and years after that, yes, still the 40-minute difference from the original orbit. It still is. And the 40-minute alteration between the relationship of the sun and moon has continued from that day until present time. And our view of their delicate relationship is what it looks like after this change occurred.
What we must understand is this was a one-time event which instituted a change that is evident and viewable from the earth. Every day since then, we must think about how the sun and moon have a delicate relationship between one another on their daily orbit cycles. If a change is made to the sun, it will affect the phases of the moon, as the moon phases are dependent upon its position in relation to the sun. The moon's phases change from a completely dark moon at the beginning of the month and phase all the way through the last waning sliver at the end of the month. If a change is made to the sun, then this will also make a change to the monthly cycle of the moon.
So why did Yahweh choose how many degrees and not Hezekiah? 2 Kings 29 says, shall the shadow go forth 10 degrees or back 10 degrees? So he gave him that choice, but he limited it. So here we see that Yah gave Hezekiah the choice of 10 degrees forwards or backwards. But why did Yah choose how many degrees and not let Hezekiah? Because no man or even Satan can change Yah's set-apart times, which are dictated by his calendar. Hezekiah might have chosen 30 or 40 degrees, and what would that have done to the calendar? If a change was made which caused more than one day's loss in any month, we would lose the last Sabbath of that month, as the last Sabbath is the 29th day of the month. As it stands now, only the 30th day, which is preparation day for new moon, is lost in some months. If we had lost 2 days instead of 1, then we would lose both the 30th day and the 29th day Sabbath, therefore destroying the 7-day weekly cycle, which Yah instituted in Genesis 1. Note that new moon begins and is the anchor for the month, and is not included in the 6-day work week, nor is new moon a Sabbath, which must follow the 6-day work week. So what is the result of Hezekiah's 40-minute or 10-degree change that was made between the relationship of the sun and the moon?
Well, let's calculate. The 10 degrees sign to Hezekiah caused a 40-minute time difference between the position of the sun in relation to the moon. This 40-minute difference is true every day since that time. 40 minutes per day times 30 days is equal to 1,200 minutes difference per month. 1,200 minutes per month times 12 months is 144,000 minutes difference per year. 144,000 times 3 years is 430 minutes difference in 3 years. So how many hours are we talking about? 432 minutes divided by 60 is 720 hours lost in 3 years' time. How many days is this? 720 hours divided by 24 hours in the day is equal to 30 days. That is, or AKA, the 13th month that occurs every 3 years.
Okay, so how did we get a 29-day month? It was from the 10 degrees difference in Hezekiah's sundial, and we showed you that in this illustration. So the moon cycle today is 29.5 days. And about the time of Hezekiah is when the whole world changed their calendars and everything began to be a 29.5-day month. So today we know that the moon has a monthly cycle of only 29.5 days, and this is from one dark moon or new moon to the next. And we know these times by reading Yah's 2 witnesses, the sun and the moon. They speak to us the length of the months, weeks, days, and years. And those scriptures are here in Genesis 1.
And Yah said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Genesis 1:14. Genesis 1:16. And Yahweh made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars.
So, of course, anyone knows we are not to observe a half a day, even though the moon has 29.5-day cycle in the present time. As the sun controls when the day begins and ends, the moon announces when the next month begins and when the last month has ended. We do not choose the length of the month. Every month will contain either 29 or 30 days, and it will never go over 30 days. So today we have a 354-day each year in a lunar calendar. Approximately every 3 years we have to add a 30-day month, and making 384 days in a year because of the change that Yah made in Hezekiah's day.
The length of the lunar cycle from the new moon to new moon, takes 29 and a half days to complete. This roughly corresponds to 1 month. However, if we based our calendar on the lunar cycle, we would soon get ahead of the Earth year. Why? Because a year of lunar cycles adds up to only 354 days, not 365 and a quarter, leaving a balance of 11 and a quarter days each year.
Okay, and so I just want to go back over that again. So because of the 11 days, it adds up in 3 years to about a 30-day amount. So that's why we have to add a 13th month about every 3 years. So we've done quite a few articles about this, and Hezekiah Sundial. There are several on our YouTube playlist and on the website. So to access more information about this topic, the 360-day year, the 29.5-day months, and everything in the Creator's calendar, please go to our website, lunarsabbathday.com. And please like if this is a blessing to you, and share it with your friends that love Yeshua. At this point, I kind of want to invite everybody that's here today. I'm not going to close the recording. I'm going to leave it open because, I want to go back here. Because we have a lot of people here today, and there are new people here, and there are people that have been around. Actually, we have talked about Hezekiah and the sundial many times. We have several YouTubes out there about it. But I wanted to leave the mic open for a while for comments from those of you that are here with us today.
Thank you. I'm amazed at the information I learned during today's presentation, that it was shifted after that event. I did not know that that was the case. That was very educational for me and very eye-opening. I thank you for that. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Diane. Praise Yah. Go ahead, Brother Pete.
I wanted to point out the staircase of Ahaz. In the ancient world, people, the way to keep track of time was astrological observation. And they had observatories where they did what? They observed the heavens, just as we're told in Genesis, or the reasons we're told in Genesis. And many of these cultures, and you can still see some today that exist, they used very elaborate, let's call them instruments, but they were very, very large. So these were sundials. The bigger you can make a sundial, the more accurate you can read it. And so in these cultures, they made these observatories out of rocks and sometimes large curved staircases over which was a tower with a marker way up. That would be the marker of a sundial, but way up in the air. And the shadow of that marker then would pass around this curved staircase, much like a banana. And they would mark it off on that staircase, both for its height, for the month, the angle of the sun as it changes through the months, and then where it was during the day. And that's how they would that's how the king would establish calendars and time scales that the kingdom would be observe underneath. So you can look those up. I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but there is still a preserved observatory of this kind somewhere in India, and I cannot remember its name. But if you look up Indian Observatory, you might find this, and it's a whole set of things that cast shadows or allow them to sight the moon at night and rising and setting points, etc. All these things were observed, and it took different instruments, if you will. These are large edifices to do all that, and probably was associated with Hezekiah's staircase.
Okay, well, that would be interesting to go and look at that. Thank you, Brother Pete. And Diane, and anybody else that has a comment or question, observation about today's discussion that we went through about the 29.5-day month.
Can I read you something?
Short reading?
Yeah, I just got 2 verses to...
Sure. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I strongly believe from that says from Moshe, but I'll go into verse 33. Okay. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons and the years, and will be dislodged from this order. And they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they neglect the ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and the seasons and the Shabbats, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years.
And we do know that the Sabbath was forgotten, and this is the time of restoration of all things, and he's restoring the calendar. He's letting us know about his calendar in the heavens, so thank you.
That's
Can I know what passage that was that he was reading? It'd be rough or good to look up.
the Book of Jubilees, chapter 6. So you can read the chapter there.
Okay, thank you.
The modern Christian church is afraid of new challenges. A study like this one, it's a challenge for the modern Christian church. And in the same time, so they are afraid to be challenged, but in the same time they promote the concept of growing spiritually, study the word. But if we pay attention to what they say, we realize that to them it's more important their interpretation about the truth than the word itself. So when the Creator is speaking to us using the prophets, it's very clear, very simple, very easy to understand. You just have to adopt that principle and live our lives accordingly. And it's more important to us to stick with what the Word is telling us, the inspired Word, than the church interpretation. This study is very clear, it's very simple to understand. If for you it's more important the biblical word, the inspired word, than the church.
Everybody wants to know why we don't have a 30-day month like we used to. The 30-day month always, the phases of the moon were perfect then. When we had the 30-day month, every time you had the first quarter phase, the next day is Sabbath. The full moon, the next day is Sabbath. The last quarter, the next day would be Sabbath. So the phases perfectly announced the Sabbath. But now that the calendar is dented, possibly at the time of Hezekiah, the 7-day schedule is not always perfect. It was perfect at the time of Israel when there was a 360-day year and a 30-day month, and that those phases were always perfect. Now they're off a little. Okay, well, I'm going to close the recording. I just want to thank everybody for being here, and we'll all stay around for discussion.